episode of Surviving the Survivor, we bring you the best guests in all of true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, Joel Waldman.
What's up, STS Nation, and welcome to another episode of Surviving the Survivor, the podcast that promises to bring you the very best guests in all of true crime, and another amazing panel today to discuss another disturbing story, very reminiscent, if you've been following the Suzanne Morphew case out of Colorado with her husband, Barry Morphew. This rings eerily similar. This is a San Antonio, Texas mother of 4 children named Suzanne Simpson. She's been missing for nearly 3 weeks. A neighbor claims he saw a fight the evening of October 6th, which turned a little physical, according to this neighbor, in an arrest warrant affidavit. And now police are saying that the husband, who has been arrested on other charges, is being uncooperative. Authorities in the San Antonio region have been looking for Suzanne Clark Simpson. She is a real estate agent, again, missing from the Olmos Park, Olmos Park neighborhood of San Antonio. If anyone happens to know anything, you're urged to call the Olmos Park Police Department. And one of the sort of sad and disturbing elements is that they've been looking through a landfill, and one of our guests, Tom Simon, has experience with searching through a landfill, so we're going to ask him about that. Without further ado, bottom right corner, our best guest, Detective Phil Ramos. He is a retired senior homicide detective with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. 35 years of service. The last 15 were in homicide, 12 years undercover. He teaches at the academy. He's a 3-time Officer of the Year. He's a native Las Vegan, which is rare, and loves riding his Harley Davidson. And Faddis will like this one. Detective Phil Ramos was present for the Tupac Shakur autopsy. He was in the room, Eric. So no conspiracy theories for you on that. Tom Simon. He served the FBI for 26 years as a special agent with an expertise in white-collar crime investigations and sensitive national security matters. He's also a CPA and a forensic accountant and a licensed private investigator based in Jacksonville. And I put these in my notes, but they didn't transfer over. Tom, what is your TikTok, Instagram, those handles?
Simon Investigations. I have a Instagram page where I do true crime stories. Not as well as you, but I try to do my best.
Well, check him out on Instagram, Simon Investigations. Last but certainly not least, Eric Faddis. He is a former felony prosecutor and a current criminal defense and civil litigator, the founding partner of Varner Faddis Elite. Varner is the wife. He appears on Court TV, ABC, NBC, Law and Crime, Newsmax, and for lawyers, they've got the coolest Insta page I've ever seen. What is your handle, Eric?
Thank you, Joel. You can find us at Varner Faddis and also at EFAD. So like Eric Faddis. It's just like a cool hip way to say it.
Yeah, there you go. Detective Ramos, I'm going to start with you. Let's say hypothetically, this is your case. You get the call. I guess it wouldn't be homicide quite yet, but let's roll with it. You get a call. This woman's been missing since October 6th, reportedly in a fight with her husband, Brad Simpson. Where do you start with this, Phil?
Well, we always want to start with the people that are closest to the victim. And in this case, it's the spouse. You always want to talk to the spouse right away, but with his reluctance to cooperate, that's a big red flag. You talk to the person who reported the incident, the neighbor, and then you get a search warrant for the house based on the circumstances. She's missing. She's got 4 kids, no activity on her cell phone or her bank cards. And, you always hear everybody say, well, you start with the spouse. the husband, the wife, they're always the first suspect. Well, it's not that they're the first suspect, but they're generally the person closest to the victim. And in this case, there was the added dimension of a fight that was witnessed by a neighbor. And not only was there a fight, the neighbor screams. And so all these circumstances come into play. And you'll hear us often say that you have to consider the totality of circumstances. And in this case, that's exactly what you have to do. It's sad. It's heartbreaking. My gut tells me she is dead. And the problem is the person closest to her isn't cooperating with the cops.
Phil, in your storied 3+ decade career, how many times have you had a spouse who is uncooperative, who then turns out to have nothing to do with it? It's pretty rare, right?
Oh, I don't think I've ever had that. Yeah, I mean, I don't think I've ever had a spouse not talk to us that didn't have some involvement in the case. Because why would you not talk to the cops that are investigating the disappearance or the death of your loved one? What, I mean, that it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Tom, I guess I'll ask you the same question. Do we know what, before we get there, Ashley Rose, do we know what Brad Simpson did for work? What his access to equipment would be? This is giving me Brian Walsh vibes. Do we have knowledge of CCTV footage from his movements after 10/7? I mean, Tom, these are all great things to look at. I'll be honest, I don't know the answer to all of them. I believe his business partner was also
James
arrested, and they were in some kind of real estate business. But Tom, if you want to pick up some of these questions, but also same thing to you, like, where do you begin with this?
I want to echo the detective's comments. Obviously, you start with the husband and see what he has to say. Obviously, he clammed up pretty quickly, which is a double-edged sword, right? It confirms to law enforcement that he's probably the best suspect to look at for this, but obviously he chooses to not incriminate himself in the process. So I think what you need to start doing, though, is taking a look at, let's take a step back and look at the timeline. So around 10 p.m. or so, there's a physical struggle in the driveway after Suzanne and Brad got back from a party at a country club. A neighbor starts hearing screams, and then an hour later, Brad drives away in his truck, returning 2 or 3 hours later to the house. So that's the critical window of time. If the theory of the case is correct, he murdered her in the house, took the body, and dumped it somewhere. And so that 3-hour window of time is going to be critical. And there's 2 things you need to do. And I have to assume the police have done these. One, you take a look at his cell phone and her cell phone. Are they bouncing off cell towers? Is the location services on? Or did he take the time to power off his cell phone before he left, which is circumstantially not bad evidence against him if you have to make this case circumstantially. The next thing you need to do is begin canvassing the entire radius of where a person could go for 2 hours for camera footage. And that would be both public camera footage at red lights and what's out there that the government puts up, as well as private camera footage of Ring doorbells, small businesses, etc. And try to gather all that information together to establish a timeline for that 3-hour period that Brad was missing.
And I'm sure that they are trying to hash out that timeline still to get it as precise as possible. Again, Suzanne Simpson, you're looking at her here, obviously a beautiful woman with her husband who is said to have been abusive, and there was a fight that night. You see him on the left. He is currently behind bars. Eric, what's interesting, it's a misdemeanor charge, but I believe he's in on a $2 million bond. Can you explain that? That does his defense lawyer is going absolutely berserk, as I guess a criminal defense attorney would. But why a $2 million bond? It obviously means they've got a lot of suspicion that this is the guy.
Yeah, Joel, I mean, pretty peculiar in terms of that bond amount. Usually for misdemeanors, we're talking in the hundreds or, several $1,000s in terms of bond. Here we're at $2 million, and actually they just raised it to $3 million because they finally were able to charge him with 2 felony offenses, which I think just happened in the past few days. But really what they're trying to do, there's also a federal hold placed on him for an allegation of possession of an illegal weapon. And really placing that federal hold in addition to the $3 million bond is the government's way of saying, hey, we need to keep this guy where he is until we think we can get enough evidence to charge him with the killing of his wife, if that's what they believe happened. So yeah, I mean, his defense attorney is really raising heck about it. But you know, I understand the government's strategy there, and it looks like they're getting closer and closer to the destination they want to be at. And it looks like this gentleman will remain in custody for a long period of time, although his attorneys are trying to reverse that.
Yeah. Detective Ramos, I mean, by the way, Jenny Benny, kids are 20, 18, 15, and 5. This is what the numbers I have as well. The kids reported to be very involved in school and sports activities. I mean, Detective, before I was going to ask you the question, I was just going to ask you, when you're working a case like this and you know that there's 4 little kids who may have lost their mom and maybe losing their dad to prison, you know, if he's found guilty or even arrested on these charges, how much does that weigh on you as a detective to try to get justice for these little kids to 20 down to 5?
Yeah, that's always a extra dimension that we deal with. You know, whenever we have kids involved, either as victims or as potential witnesses, it gets to you. You know, you kick it up a notch, especially for that little 5-year-old. You know, the older ones, you know, they can deal with it a little bit better, but the 5-year-old is just got to be wondering what the heck is going on and where's mommy? Why would she leave? So while we're all driven to get justice for the surviving family members, when you have youngsters like this that are directly related to the victim, that just gives you a little more drive to, you know, to push a 12-hour day into a 15, 16-hour day.
And Tom, this is a you and Ramos question, but I'll pose it to you, Tom. Obviously, we hope she's found. We've seen the story before, and typically it does not have a good ending. How tough is it without her or a body to potentially charge this guy moving forward? How does that complicate the process?
Well, obviously, it's extremely hard, right, to bring a first-degree murder case without a body. It has been done dozens of times in the U.S. successfully. In fact, the Lacey Peterson case was going to go to trial probably before Lacey's body was finally discovered based on the circumstantial evidence. And I don't think the circumstantial evidence in this case is bad. You have lots of inconvenient facts. You have the 5-year-old girl, the daughter, saying, telling the police that daddy hit mommy and took mommy's cell phone away, and mommy had a bruise on her arm. There's just so much here to kind of build a circumstantial case on, but that's the last option that the prosecutors want to go down that road, because it's really tough to do a murder case without a dead body. It's been done recently, but man, oh man, I wouldn't want to have to try that case.
Yeah, that gets much more difficult. Nicole here asking why people can't get a divorce instead of taking out spouses. That is the presumption here, but innocent until proven guilty. And right now, Brad Simpson has not been proven guilty. Eric, I'm going to have you wear both the state's hat and the defense hat at some point today. But as far as the state goes, what is happening kind of behind the scenes right now in light of what we were just talking about? There is no body. It's a really tough case to charge. What is the state doing in concert with authorities to move this forward on their end?
Yeah, Joel, in addition to what Tom and Phil have mentioned, I imagine the state is looking into the forensics of all of this. They're looking into digital forensics. They're going to look into Brad's devices. They're going to see if it tracked his location. They're going to see if there are internet searches around the time that this woman went missing that could be linked to her disappearance. They're likely, if they haven't done it already, they're going to do a search of the home, and they're going to scour every inch of that home. They're going to look for biological material. They're They're going to look for signs of struggle. They're going to look for things that appear out of place, and to try to really piece all of this together, because there are still so many outstanding unknown questions or unanswered questions. And so that's really what the prosecution is going to try to hone in on, try to find answers for those. And we're still really early on. That this disappearance happened this month, and so that inures to the benefit of the government.
You see Ned Smith here. Brad was a known abuser of his wife. Never a good thing. I don't know. It never ceases to amaze me that people resort to this instead of simply leaving a relationship. Now, there's a quote here from, I believe this is a friend. One of the reasons why this is so crucial is because when a mother goes missing, they do not go missing by accident. Children need their mothers the most. And that is the reason we have been able to get so many people involved in the situation. It's because Susan was a beloved mother. She was an incredible person, and she just had the sweetest disposition. Detective Ramos, the first part of that, they don't go missing by accident. That's for sure. She's got 4 kids. She's not going to just take off and ditch her kids. So let me ask you this. You're obviously going to try to lean on this guy, but he's not being cooperative. But you've got his business partner, and he was in there. We'll get to this in a little bit. He, according to the report, helped Brad Simpson hide an AK-47 in a wall. And that's why the feds are getting involved in this. But Phil, what do you do? Old school Phil Ramos. Are you having a conversation with the business partner, a guy named Cotter, Cottr? Are you having a conversation with him, a difficult conversation, trying to get info from him?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But it doesn't sound like he had anything to do with the actual disappearance or any involvement in her death. But, you got to hold that stuff close to the vest and really lean on him. And it's curious to me that the neighbors saw the altercation in the driveway and then heard the screams, but there's no report that they heard gunshots. And so I'm thinking AK-47 makes a lot of noise. I mean, it makes a lot of noise. You're going to hear it if you're next door. I'm thinking that maybe that's why he was worried about a federal charge, because maybe the possession of that AK was prohibited in Texas, which surprises me, because Texas, man, you can own a cannon and they won't do anything. But, so I'm thinking that may have been his concern, is they're going to find this AK-47. I'm not going to be allowed to have it, and I'm going to catch a federal charge. If he heard screams, if there were gunshots, surely he would have heard the gunshots, but we don't know. So you're back to this fight. What precipitated the fight? You go to the restaurant that they were having dinner at and talk to the servers and any other people that were there with them, and see if the fight started there, or maybe it started on the way home, what the fight was about. And you continue to build your victimology and find out all you can about her. We just never know what's going on behind closed doors, and there may have been some dirty, dark secret that came to light that caused this fight. Just based on these circumstances, I think that the husband lost control, lost his temper, went into a fit of rage, and we're seeing the result of that.
Yeah, I mean, Phil, and what's your gut telling you? Because when I read about the AK-47, I was like, whoa, that's a gruesome way to handle it if that's what he did. But is your gut telling you that, like you were saying, he's just worried about that, but maybe if he did get rid of his wife, he did it in a different way, a different manner?
Yeah, that's what my gut's telling me. And we don't know if the kids were in the house when this happened. So let's look at all the different options that he would have had if she's dead, if he's responsible for her death, and that gun was not involved. Then you're looking at manual strangulation, suffocation, different manners that would have not brought attention to what they were doing. In other words, if there was something really ugly going on, were those kids in that house, and did they hear the disturbance? Did they hear the screams? Did they hear Were they aware of the fight in the driveway and stuff like that? So the older kids will be talked to at a deeper level than the younger kids, but what you've got to work with is where you go. I mean, you have to follow the evidence, and where the evidence points in whatever direction it points you at, that's the direction you got to go. And there's going to be well, why are the cops focusing on him? Why aren't they out looking for the real killer? On the golf course with OJ looking for the real killer. Well, they've got the real killer. If this happened, they've got the real killer, and you can't get past him. You want to eliminate him. If he's not the suspect, you need to eliminate him, but with lack of cooperation, you can't eliminate him. So you're stuck. You can't go looking for, ugly bad guy hiding in the bushes when the husband won't cooperate with you so that you can eliminate him or not eliminate him.
Yeah. And by the way, there were some very revealing text messages between the husband and the business partner. I'm going to get to in a minute, but Tom, back to you. Ramos was just talking about the federal nexus here on the gun charge. Anything to add to that? And then this question is interesting. I'm going to pose it to you, even though you're not a psychologist. How do you hate your spouse more than you love your children? Why do we keep seeing these things happen, Tom?
I think, well, let me answer the question first, and I'd like to talk about the federal charge. I think it's probably going to turn out, if this case, gets firmly solved, that this was a argument that got out of hand, right? This is two people who were out partying at their fancy country club. They got all liquored up. He's got a temper. She's, for right or wrong, getting on his nerves. He attacks her physically in the driveway. And then the next thing you know, that fight escalated once they got inside the house, and then he's got a dead wife on his hands. I think that's probably going to be what we find, as opposed to some kind of long-standing plan where he's trying to collect the insurance money and premeditation. That's not an excuse, but but I think that's probably going to be what we're looking at. If I can circle back to the gun and the federal charge, I think it's important to, I'm a big timeline guy, to understand the timeline here. So Suzanne goes missing on the night of Sunday, October 6th. 2 days later, on October 8th, Brad texts his best friend and business partner, James Cotter. They've been in business at this point for about 22, 24 years when they were working for Cotter's daddy's firm before I think they took it over. I think it was in the real estate industry. Brad texts James, "If you're in Bandera, can you haul ass and meet me at your house? I don't have much time." And then a little bit later, he texts, says, "Sorry for the urgency, but you're all I've got. Especially now, social media is destroying me." So then Cotter comes over, gets the AK-47, and then hides it behind the drywall in a room of his house, later to be discovered by the police. Here's what's interesting. The federal charge that Brad has hanging over his head has nothing to do with that AK-47. On October 10, family members bring multiple firearms owned by Brad to the Olmos Park Police Department to surrender them. One of those weapons was a short-barreled rifle, which is illegal to have federally. And that's the federal charge that he's sitting on. So I agree with the detective that a lack of gunshot here is a real problem. But for some reason, Brad is singularly focused on an AK-47 in his house when he's got an illegal firearm in his house that ends up costing him the federal charge. It doesn't make sense unless he just didn't have an understanding that short-barreled rifle was illegal.
That's very interesting. And the plot thickens with that, I guess. I guess time is going to tell on this one. But Monique Dawn, by the way, from Pat Ferguson in the chat, the guy on the bottom left in that beautiful suit reminds me of Conor McGregor. What a compliment.
That's the second Conor McGregor reference I've had in the past 2 weeks. I'm
really? How's your left hand? Is it powerful?
It's not MMA professional, but I've had a lot of recreational bouts. So,
so Eric, just talk to us here kind of about the similarities. I mean, both affluent families. I'm talking Barry Morphew and Suzanne Morphew. The guy was inches away from standing trial, but there was some ineptness on the part of the prosecution. And now, it's possible they found the body now a couple years later. They're going to probably circle back to him. what do you see similar and what do you see different between these two cases?
Yeah, bizarre some of the parallels here. We have these reasonably well-to-do families. It's not like they're on the dregs of society or anything like that. I think Brad Simpson was in like a $1 million home or something like that. And they have children, and they don't have some sort of like extensive criminal history. And so on top of that, in both cases, the wives go missing. And here that they have not been found yet, except for Suzanne Morphew, who was found years afterwards. But Suzanne Simpson has not yet been found. There is there are no witnesses that we know about to any sort of killing. There is some circumstantial evidence. There's some things that raise some eyebrows, but there are some holes in these timelines and in these narratives so far that the defense is going to use to try to exploit the case and further their interests. And so a lot of similarities here. In the Suzanne Morphew case, many are, I think, I don't know about all of the children, but nearly all of the children supported Barry, the father, even after the allegations come out. I don't know where the children in the Brad Simpson case stand on these allegations, but I'd be interested to hear kind of what their take is on it, because they are the ones who are most closely connected to these participants and to this situation.
Yeah, and by the way, the Suzanne Simpson's sister has spoken out, but we had not heard from the family, and that's a good point. Barry Morphew has 2 daughters in Colorado, and they both stood by his side, even though a lot is pointing in his direction. That's always interesting. And how weird is it that they're both Suzannes, spelled the exact same way, which is kind of eerie. But from Cookie Harris, back to Tom Simon on this one. The landfill search lasted 4 days, then was called off before the search resumed back to the Olmos Basin, which is the woods across from the Simpson home, where screams were heard. Tell us about trying to pour through a landfill. That cannot be a fun job, Tom, and it sounds like it's a painstaking job.
Done 3 landfill searches in my careers for missing persons, and in only one of them did we actually recover a body, the body of the victim. It's a needle in a haystack, quite literally, and its success relies on the intelligence you have about where and when that body was dumped, and the extent that once you kind of follow that from a dumpster to a truck to probably a exchange station landfill, and then if the big landfill can tell you exactly in what quadrant of that landfill and how deep that day was, and then you can begin excavating, spreading it out over what we call a deck. And then you get a row of people about as long as a football field with rakes to begin going through about 3 feet deep of that deck. Then you clear that deck out and then bring in the next deck. And you do that again and again and again. The fact that they only did it for 4 days tells me that the ones I did lasted, 1 to 2 weeks each before we either kind of made it through the entire lasagna of that landfill and gave up, or we had success. The fact that this only went for 4 days makes me concerned that they did not have good intelligence about where he was dumped, where the body was dumped. They don't have like him throwing something into a dumpster, for example, where they could trace it. They were taking a fair shot, not a bad shot, but they finally realized that this was futile because the amount of trash we produce as Americans is astronomical.
That's a good point. A lot of
another point about landfill that people always ask when I tell my story of my landfill searches. Everyone's like, "What about cadaver dogs?" Cadaver dogs are not good in landfill searches. The smell of the rotting garbage is too intense and will overpower anything that the dog would be able to smell. We do not use cadaver dogs in landfill searches.
I'm proud to say that I've done one landfill story. I cannot remember for the life of me what it was, in Florida at one point, and the odor was overwhelming. Let's put it that way. It was not fun. Phil, have you done landfill searches, Phil Ramos?
Yeah, they're miserable. I mean, like Tom said, they're just a pain in the butt, but you have to do them. And he made a very good point about it only lasting 4 days. Something caused them to stop that search in 4 days, because you can't do an effective landfill search in just 4 days. And also a lot of people say, well, why didn't you get the dogs out there? Well, the dogs, their sense of smell is so much more than people realize. That those, the decomposition of all that garbage it just makes them ineffective. They can't do it. But landfill searches, man, you really got to have some good intel to even get started on that. I mean, think about it. Everybody's driven by or seen pictures of, 100 seagulls flying over a pile of garbage, and that's what you're doing. You're just literally looking for that human-sized needle in a massive, massive haystack.
And Tom, just back to this. I mean, do you agree with Phil? He said they stopped that for a reason because you wouldn't find something necessarily in 4 days. And apparently they're searching a wooded area. Do you think they got some sort of intel or a tip or something? The screaming was, I think, heard coming from that area, near this kind of forested, wooded area. But you think there was some kind of tip that pulled them from the landfill, Tom, back to another area?
I sure hope so. I mean, that would be the ideal situation, is that the police know something that they're not sharing with the public. The fact that they walked away from the landfill search after 4 days is curious, but they may have realized as a small department that they have bitten off way more than they can chew, because it's a real resource suck. I mean, we had, 50 FBI agents, 50 local sheriffs and task force officers kind of working, 8-hour shifts in that landfill, just digging and digging and digging through it. And that's when we had perfect intelligence that the body was likely thrown in this dumpster because, we had good footage of it. And so, I wouldn't want to embark in one of these searches just on spec, just speculating that there may be a body in there, because it's just so resource intensive. And so either the police had a tip, or they made the decision that this wasn't the best use of the resources at the time. And to put it in kind of graphic terms, the body's going to be there if they needed to restart the search a month from now.
By the way, welcome to, I see some Grizzly True Crime in the chat. And welcome to all of you. Good to have you here. So Eric Faddis, the husband, is arrested on October 9th. She's last seen on October 6th. So this would be 3 days later at his ranch in Bandera County. It was unclear to me whether this is a second home. I'm not exactly sure, but again, they're a pretty affluent family. This guy was in the real estate business. He's charged, Eric, with unlawful restraint, assault causing bodily injury to a family member, prohibited weapon possession, and tampering with evidence. But how do they charge him with assault causing bodily injury to a family member if we don't have Suzanne here to look at?
Yeah, good question, Joel. My understanding is that a neighbor actually witnessed this physical altercation. That a neighbor claims they saw Brad Simpson getting physically aggressive with Suzanne, and I think holding her down at one point as she's trying to apparently escape. And so that alone, in most states, in order to charge assault causing injury, the injury can just be physical pain. And if they heard Suzanne, crying out in pain or saying, "Hey, stop doing this, or you're hurting me," or even just observing someone who appears to be in physical distress, that alone is likely enough to just bring the charge. Remember the legal standard to bring the charge is just probable cause. That's essentially a reasonable belief that a crime has occurred and that someone committed it. That's a pretty low standard.
Look at this from Cookie Harris, seems to know this case really well. The younger child, Phil Ramos, was the only one at home and the only one. And again, they range in age from 5 to 20, 4 children, 5 to 20. The younger child was the only one at home and the only one who saw Brad hurt her mom, as she told her kindergarten teacher the next day. So you add that, detective, to the neighbor. The neighbor says that they heard 2 or 3 screams. And this is a direct quote. Ms. Simpson was attempting to get away from Mr. Simpson's grasp as he tried to pull her downwards. About an hour later, the neighbor reportedly sees Brad Simpson's black GMC pickup drive off and return an hour or 2 later. It's a lot of information, but yet not a lot of information. I look at that, I read that, I say, okay. When you hear this, the 3 screams, tried to pull her down, and then this black GMC, what is happening in your mind with that information?
Well, my first question to the neighbor would be, why didn't you call the cops when you saw and heard all of this? Obviously, there was something amiss there. but you know, a lot of people don't like getting involved, sticking their nose in other people's business. But certainly, and I don't have enough information to make an intelligent comment on it, but I certainly would have hoped that there wasn't a big passage of time before that lady's hurt. Like he knocked her down and tried to do this and tried to do that, and you know, maybe I should call the cops, and you know, so. But be that as it may, it happened in the order that it did. Um, and the fact that the little girl reported that to her kindergarten teacher. Teachers are mandatory reporters. When they are given information like that, then they have to make some report to law enforcement. They have to speak out about it. So the whole time lapse of all this is a little detrimental to the investigation because they weren't able to get right on it. You know, they weren't able to get as soon as the screams were heard and the truck left. You know, in a perfect world, the cops would have been notified and they would have been waiting for him to come back. But clearly, when he left most likely with her body, if he killed her. And when he came back, the body is probably no longer there. And like Tom said earlier, all his digital footprint is really going to be crucial in this, the timeline and where he was, where her phone was. You know, these are tough cases, and the longer it goes without a body, the worse condition that body's going to be, and you know, that's going to be a little more detrimental to the case. But if you get a body, at least you have a body and you can get a cause of death, hopefully.
I didn't know this. Ned Smith is in this neck of the woods. That's where she lives. She's saying that Suzanne and her sister were estranged, which is interesting. I had no idea, but she is speaking out about this. Tom, you know, Detective Ramos was just talking about the digital forensics here. We know that cars now are not cars from like the 1970s. They've got sophisticated computers, and we hear that the black GMC pickup drove off and returned an hour or two later. What are they doing with that vehicle right now? I assume that they were able to take possession of it. Law enforcement, are they looking, you know, forensically at it to try to pinpoint where this car went in that period of time?
Absolutely. And modern vehicles are all driving around internet-enabled devices, and so they're downloading all the data from that truck because, you know, a luxury car, a good truck, will have a program in it that'll tell you where it is. So when you lose your car parked at the you know, at the airport or the mall, you can take a look in an app and see exactly where it is. I think, though, in addition to that 3-hour window of time where he may or may not have been getting rid of the body, his whereabouts on the day of Monday, October 7, after the murder, are really curious, right? He clearly wakes up in the morning somewhere and his wife is not there. He doesn't report it to anyone. The daughter, no one knew she was missing until Suzanne failed to pick up the 5-year-old daughter from school at 3 p.m. on Monday, October 7th. And that's what sparked this whole thing. And it wasn't until later that evening that Brad reported Suzanne missing to the police. I'm really curious what Brad was doing all day on October 7th. And I would really love to see if there was any contact between him and the mysterious Mr. Cotter, because Mr. Cotter has a story to tell, whether he was just hiding a gun for his friend, but his best friend for 22 years was willing to stick his neck out to put a gun, to hide a gun from him. I'd love to hear what conversations they have. The police should and probably are squeezing Mr. Cotter right now and trying to play, let's make a deal with him in exchange for his story. He could be the key to this whole thing.
I agree with that for sure. And I hope there's an old school detective having a conversation the way Ramos would. From Texas Salty here, Brad's family is not being supportive of him. His brother has publicly called him out for not helping police with locating Suzanne. And then you've got Cookie Harris, Brad's brother. Barton Simpson has spoken out many times regarding the family and their status, as well as their disappointment in Brad not cooperating with law enforcement. So maybe they, are sensing something as well. To you, Eric, this is from the sister, direct quote: "We are devastated by the loss of my sister." This is Teresa Clark. The search will continue and will not stop until we find her. We're going to bring Suzanne home because Suzanne was an incredible mother, a daughter, a sister, and she was a beloved person of the San Antonio community. She has a large tribe and a large family because we're determined to find her. We're going to bring her home. My question for you, Eric, just walk us through. You're a criminal defense attorney, and this guy hires you. I believe, by the way, he might be I read he was a court-appointed attorney, which is interesting because it sounds like they have money. So I'm not sure if he's a public defender, but let's just say he hires you. Are you asking him questions? How do you handle a guy like this? Because you got to think in your heart of hearts, maybe this guy had something to do with it, but your job is to defend him. So how do you approach a client like this?
Personally, I always want to know what happened, because if something happened, there's usually evidence of it. And in some form or fashion, whether that's witness testimony, whether that's physical evidence left behind. And so I want to know what I'm up against. I want to know what the government might find. And I want to look into, doing legal research and trying to mount a defense against what could be a very serious murder case against my client. It's always a delicate scenario when you're having these conversations, because, these are things that, a lot of people don't want to talk about, even if they're perfectly innocent. This person's wife has just disappeared and their family is in ruins. And that's a difficult conversation as well. So it starts with that conversation with the client. You do investigation on the defense too. It's not only the government and law enforcement. We'd be interviewing witnesses, interviewing folks close to Brad, interviewing folks close to Suzanne, trying to piece together sort of what happened. I would certainly be detailing Brad's whereabouts. Now, whether you turn those whereabouts over to the prosecution is a whole nother story.
Wildfire saying she feels for law enforcement who had to go into that landfill. So Detective Ramos, this guy Brad Simpson, the husband, was uncooperative, as we said. He was asked to come in for a follow-up interview and he just didn't show up. The arrest affidavit, in quotes, says he appeared to be separating himself from his family. What do you make of that? I'm not sure what that really means, that he was separating himself from his family, but is that an indication to you? I would assume that things were not going well, coupled with the fact that he doesn't show up. How do you follow that up?
Well, you go to the family and ask them what's going on. How come he's not talking to you guys? I think maybe that there may be some semantics involved in there. He may not be separating himself from the family. The family may be separating themselves from him, because we know that the family's upset that he's not cooperating with the cops in the investigation. So that's just another red flag, man. I mean, that just tells you you're on the right track. If this guy's family is getting away from him and not supporting him and not out there with signs and, help us find our loved one, it doesn't look good for him at all. And these circumstances just keep building and building and building. It may be that DA's office might have to go at it without the body. I mean, but if they determine that there's enough circumstantial evidence that they can bring a charge, thinking that, this, however she met her demise, if she did, would have been inside that house. And I got to think that they were able to come up with some kind of evidence inside that house, some kind of forensic evidence to indicate that, there was a crime committed inside that house.
Many greetings and support from Belgium, from Peter Pullman. Tom, this brings me to kind of an abstract question for you. I mean, I know there's crimes in other countries, but definitely not at the rate that there is here in the United States, especially not the kind of level of violence. Why do you think that is?
It's the $1 million question, right? I mean, you could take a look at gun crimes and say that, we're a nation with 320 million people and probably 600 million guns, and that's easy to point to, but we don't know this to be a gun crime. I think those of us who are kind of in the, true crime community who kind of wallow in this, it seems like these things are happening every day, and America is just this cesspool of crime. But I think when you take a look at the size of our population compared to the size of non-gun crimes, I don't know that we're that much worse than any other nation. Again, we have a firearms problem because we have so many gosh darn guns in this country, but that doesn't seem to be the case here. This isn't a school shooting. This isn't a gangland slaughter. This is a domestic dispute that probably got way out of hand.
Detective Ramos, back to you on this one from Violet. And keep the questions coming. These are great questions. As an affluent family, and Ned Smith says his family has a lot of money, so he came from money. Did their home or neighbors have home cameras? I mean, Detective Ramos, this seems like a very obvious place to start, too. I would assume that the Olmos Park Police Department has gone and knocked on all the neighbors' doors and tried to get any surveillance footage they could have. That's number one. And then secondly, here again from Cookie Harris, there's at least 3 witnesses to the physical altercation: the younger child, the neighbor, and Suzanne spoke to her mom an hour prior, telling her Brad had hurt her, especially her wrist and back. Let's start with the cameras. What are you doing with these Ring cameras or whatever else you've got on these adjacent homes? Have they looked at all that already? I would assume so.
Oh yeah, it's like Tom said earlier, that's one of the first things you do is you canvass a neighborhood for cameras in addition to the cameras that are public. And you start back at the restaurant, and were there video cameras inside the restaurant? Most likely there were. So that's your starting point. You try and figure the most likely route that they took from the restaurant to the house, and check any public cameras there or any private cameras there. So in this day and age, there's cameras absolutely everywhere. And another thing that's going to come into play is what assets are available to this police department. Are they equipped enough and experienced enough to handle in-depth investigation like this is? They may be calling for some assistance, either maybe from the FBI or the state Texas Rangers. The Texas Rangers are a great outfit, and they help the local agencies when they need it. So, but yeah, that's stick and whistle 101, knocking on the doors and say, hey, something happened here, and did you notice anything unusual at all? Because this is going to be one of those cases where a neighbor's going to say, oh, wait a minute, you know what, I did hear something. I didn't make anything of it, but it was at about 3 a.m. or something like that. This is why we always say, if you think you saw something, let us know, no matter how insignificant you think it may be. It could be one of the crucial pieces of evidence that we need to continue our investigation in the direction that it's going.
I see an interesting comment I'm going to get back to, but Eric, so now this is the business partner named Cotter. Forget his first name. Tom, you remember his first name?
Boy, I got it here. Hang in there. James
Cotter. Okay, so James Cotter is the business partner. Eric, he's charged with prohibited weapon possession. Apparently, he had no attorney listed for him, and he's also, business partner here. So I assume he has money. He, as we talked about earlier, is accused of hiding an AK-47 because Brad Simpson asked him to. And Tom read some of these texts, but Brad Simpson asked this guy Cotter to haul over because he doesn't have much time. And can you meet me at your house? Again, stressing that he doesn't have much time. Also saying, you're all I've got. Sorry for the urgency, but you're all I got, especially now. Social media is destroying me. In your opinion, this guy could be either an accomplice to the crime or knows about this crime. How is the state potentially going to deal with him? Are they already saying, hey, we'll offer you some sort of deal, some kind of immunity? Just tell us what happened here.
I think without question, this James Cotter business partner is likely a trove of information for the government. They've been partners for multiple decades, and you confide in your business partner about your personal life sometimes. And so, was there prior issues with the marriage? Was Brad Simpson planning anything? Was there grievance and stuff like that? Those things could have been conveyed to James Cotter. And on top of that, James Cotter has clearly a lesser charge and a lesser prosecutorial focus on him. So he may be more inclined to say, hey, I didn't commit the act here. I may have been involved in some accomplice way or some accessory after the fact way, but I don't want to go to prison for a long time. I'm willing to kind of talk with the government, provide the information he does have. And that could be damning for Brad Simpson.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out. I mean, Eric, do you have an idea why this guy would have a court-appointed attorney if he's got a lot of money? Is the family maybe cutting him off here? I don't know.
I'm wondering because when you look at Brad Simpson's bond, his bond amount right now is $3 million. And so sometimes a person who's been accused of a crime needs to decide, hey, do I put all of my resources towards getting an attorney, which means I might have to stay in custody and not post bond? Or do I put all my resources towards trying to post this massive bond? And then once I get out, I can try to sort of brainstorm about what my attorney options are at that juncture. I'm wondering if that is sort of the conflict with which Brad Simpson is wrestling behind bars.
Shout out to JW, who's got a lot more initials. She's watching us from Doha, Qatar, in the Mideast. So lest you think we are not a global show, we have proved you wrong. Heather W here, right back to Faddis again. As a lawyer, what do you do if your client tells you they did the crime, but they want to plead not guilty in court? What happens, Eric Faddis?
It's an important question. Every person accused of a crime has the right to plead not guilty, regardless of what happened. And so, and on top of that, sometimes, and this is kind of a saying that might ruffle some feathers, your viewers might not like it, but there's a saying that says, just because you did it doesn't mean you're guilty. And what I mean is that there are potential legal defenses that can arise. Let's say that Brad Simpson did kill his wife, but let's say, I'm just completely speculating and no disrespect to anybody, but the wife grabbed the firearm and there was a struggle over the firearm and the firearm went off. I'm just saying that there are circumstances under which an incident can occur, but that doesn't necessarily mean the person is guilty. And it's part of the defense attorney's job to explore what those circumstances are, what exactly happened, and how it comports with the law, and how you can serve your client's best interests, even in a horrible scenario.
Phil Ramos, a few people were saying bring in the Texas Rangers, one of the most kind of iconic law enforcement agencies in the country. Dorliak here says the Texas Rangers are involved. What would that do in your estimation in terms of this investigation? How do they divide that up between the local authorities and the Texas Rangers?
Well, the Rangers are going to have much more access to the sophisticated equipment you would need, to look for DNA and the manpower to, travel through the state. And they bring that added dimension to assist in an investigation. Without knowing the size of this department and what their finances are, how many murders do they handle in a year and stuff like that? It's difficult to say it, and that's not a slam against this department whatsoever. But there's places, there's smaller agencies that have one murder a year, and so the level of experience that their detectives have is going to be limited. And when you have situations like that, the smart thing to do is reach out and ask for assistance, and that sounds like that's exactly what they did.
We're going to go a few more minutes. If you have questions, now's the time. Big triple Qs, and I'm going to scroll down to the bottom of the chat. Tom, to you, state agencies who are responsible for the statewide missing persons alert. I read that they pulled the statewide alerts. Is there a reason for that we know of?
Well, I mean, I think at this point, it's clear that this is not a lady who like dipped out to a spa. I mean, something really bad has happened to her. Even the family has made peace with the idea that she has likely been killed. It's just a question on proving it and proving the circumstances and establishing beyond a reasonable doubt who did it. So what, don't waste the public's time giving them hope looking for this lady in every crowded town center. Let's get the public working on trying to locate where a body might be stashed.
Eric, in a kind of of course, a twist to all this. Now, Brad Simpson, who's in Bexar County, if I'm pronouncing that right, he's now asking a judge to let him see his children. However, police are saying they're still investigating her disappearance, and the DA there is not going to grant child visitation without a fight. We call that chutzpah where I'm from. What's going on here? He wants to see the kids. How's that going to play out?
Yeah, sure. So what defense is arguing is like, hey, these kids are not listed victims. My client has not even been charged with murder yet. And so, if he does get out, he should be able to at least have contact with his family, so long as it's not harmful. But what the prosecution is going to say, and I think they probably win this argument, they're going to say, hey, look, there's an extraordinarily serious homicide investigation going on that centers around this household. At least one of the children was likely home when an event may have taken place. And on top of that, Brad Simpson is charged with evidence tampering. So that shows that he allegedly has an interest in sort of trying to cover things up, to manipulate the process, to try to make things better for himself. And the concern is that he might engage in such tampering with witnesses if he's allowed to have contact with them. So I think, especially at this juncture, the judge is going to disallow that contact.
By the way, it's Bexar County and not whatever I said. And Lily Pauly says, even I know it is pronounced bear and I'm in the UK. What can I tell you? I'm kind of dumb. What can I tell you? And I've traveled to a lot of parts of the country. So my apologies to Bexar County. It's just maybe you should spell it BEAR. That's my suggestion to Bexar County. This is true from Sherry's News. Some person put a GoFundMe together for Suzanne Simpson, but that person's a fraud. What is wrong with people wanting to make money on a missing woman? Absolutely disgusting. Some people have no shame. It is horrible. So they've asked to stop. And I honestly don't know if there's a updated. If anyone has that, please email to me, survivingthesurvivor@gmail.com, survivingthesurvivor@gmail.com, and I will put it in there. The Olmos Park, OLMOS Park Police, they say please contact them, 210-822-2000, 210-822-2000. If anyone has any information, they obviously want to talk to you about that. So Detective Ramos, to you, this guy Cotter, James Cotter, they say comes from a very wealthy family. When you go to the jail that he is sitting in, how do you approach him, assuming he'll talk to you? He's definitely got the key, I think, or some of the answers to this. How do you lean on this guy?
You sit there and keep clicking the handcuffs, pointing at him, saying, these are going around your wrist. But no, that's old school. You just tell him, so look, you're going to be in a lot of trouble because we can put you here and X, Y, and Z. And why are you protecting this guy? If she was murdered, if he did it, why are you protecting him? There's, you make it, you just lean on him as best you can. And different investigators use different tactics, and some are more beneficial than others. But he's going to be key. He's going to be one of the key and essential witnesses for both sides in this case. And like we were saying, I'm not going to jail for you, man. I didn't have anything to do with this. I didn't know why you wanted me to hide that gun, but I'm not going to take a fall for you.
A final thing here, then we get final thoughts. Eric Faddis, this is his Brad Simpson's attorney, a guy's last name is Gilmore, who can't be too happy at the moment with his client. He said, and I quote here, the charges against Brad Simpson are ludicrous, and said that the case was, quote unquote, theater to incapacitate him, to keep him in custody. He goes on, he says it again. It is ludicrous that he's being held on the $2 million bond for a misdemeanor case that the state knows it can't and isn't ever going to try to prove. They're not even going to file these cases, and they don't want to file these cases because if they file these cases, then all of his rights kick in. As long as these cases are unfiled, we can't urge a speedy trial. What is this guy saying here in essence? And I hate to say it, Faddis, but this is why people hate your kind at times, but he's doing his job. He's doing his job. So what is he saying here?
You know, some of them are very hateable, and I get that. But what he's
not
trying
you,
to do,
Faddis, not you.
No, of course not me. But I think he's trying to counter the narrative in part. So like there's been all this coverage, right? And it's been horrible for his client. So he's trying to sort of counter that narrative, shift the attention to like, oh no, it's actually the government that's engaging in misconduct. But it's so dangerous to overstate your case. It reminds me of the Diddy case and the Diddy attorney who in the beginning said, hey, he's 100% innocent and we have like uncontrovertible proof that he's innocent. And then the Cassie video comes out, and then he's got to start backpedaling and saying, "Oh, wait, well, you know, he's an imperfect guy, but he's not whatever." And so, you know, you never know everything that your client is telling you and not telling you. And so, I think you've got to be a lot more cautious in making public statements about a case like that.
Very interesting. I mean, again, another disturbing case. Suzanne Simpson, she goes missing on October 6th, just a few weeks ago. October 9th, her husband, Brad Simpson, is arrested on separate unrelated charges, along with his business partner, a guy named James Cotter. Eric Faddis, kind enough to join us today, a former felony prosecutor, a current criminal defense and civil litigator. He is one half of Varner Faddis Elite Legal. I love the name. His wife is the other half. Court TV, ABC, NBC, Law and Crime, Newsmax. He appears on all those. Where do we go next legally with this, Eric?
You know, I think if they can find the body, that is so critical because it could shed light. I mean, one, it proves that she is dead, which is important in a murder case. Two, it may shed light on the cause of death, the circumstances of death, and also a possible cover-up afterwards. I would note that Brad Simpson, I think, is involved in real estate, so he might have a good understanding of the terrain, of the layout, of the physical geography of this state, and he might know what he thinks is a good hiding place, so that might be very difficult to find that body.
Shout out to Mossberg Mom, who I met covering the Sarah Boone trial. I miss you, Mossberg. Hope you're doing well. And we will reconnect at a future trial. Tom Simon, he served the FBI for 26 years. Obviously a retired FBI agent and a current Florida private investigator. And he's on Instagram and TikTok at Simon Investigations. Check it out. Tom, what do you do to try to find this body, to Eric's point? I mean, that's the gold, obviously, assuming she's no longer with us, which I think most people are. You pressure these two gentlemen. I mean, what are you doing to get to where she is, wherever she is?
You do everything, anything and everything, right? You're pressuring Cotter to tell the truth. The charge against Mr. Cotter is not terribly huge. It may not be something that he's scared about, but this is a guy who certainly cares about his reputation in the community and doesn't want to be saddled with the reputation and the scarlet letter of being an accessory to a murder. So get him on the bus rather than under the bus with the team government. Then you continue to exploit the cameras in town. There's someone out there who has a camera that you don't know about. If someone out there, for instance, I wouldn't be surprised if the Simpsons had a Ring doorbell camera that Mr. Simpson, if this is true, deleted the footage from. But you can get a subpoena or a search warrant to the Ring doorbell company. They'll actually download the footage from their servers and provide that. All of these steps should be taking place. And then if all else fails, you can always reconvene and continue that landfill search, see if maybe you get lucky.
Ida Shaw with a good comment here. Can we please say if we find Suzanne instead of the body? Excellent point. Let's hope we do find Suzanne. I think as either Phil or Tom said, the family themselves are starting to feel that maybe she is no longer with us. Detective Phil Ramos, he's a retired senior homicide detective, one of the coolest guys you will ever meet. 15 years in homicide, 12 years undercover. The guy dragged $1 million in cash through one of the Vegas casinos to try to infiltrate the mob. 3-time Officer of the Year. He rides a Harley. Faddis, have you met a cooler dude than this guy?
He's up there, man. This is a special day for me.
Faddis, do you have a Harley? You should have a Harley with that.
I can't pull a Harley off. Detective Ramos can, but I'm no way.
Yeah.
I'm too dainty. It's not going to work.
Yeah, I got you. I hear you. Detective Ramos, you're working this case. It's got to be eating at you 3 weeks in. What else are you trying? I mean, you got to get creative. How do you get creative with something like this when 3 weeks have already passed?
Well, my gut tells me that they've made a lot more progress in their letting out, and with the amount of time that they've been spending on this, there's so many things that you have to hold back because you're still working on them, and there's so many things that you still have to follow up on. Certainly, the priority is trying to find her body. I'm sorry about having to put it so bluntly, but Suzanne was a human being, and she deserves the respect of, if she's dead, then let's get her back to her family. And just to show you what kind of sick sense of humor we have, Brad Simpson's brother is named Bart Simpson. He's screwed.
I did not realize that. A little levity. Carm is a big proponent of humor. These cases are just so sad. So, got to keep it light at times. Ida Shaw, thanking the best guest here. She is a beautiful woman. That's what Angela B says here. And look at this. Doc K loving the Vegas Metropolitan PD, by the way, which is where Phil Ramos served for a really long time. We're obviously going to stay on this. Let's hope that they do find Suzanne and bring her back home one way or the other. Big shout out to Eric Faddis, Detective Phil Ramos, FBI agent Tom Simon. We're back tomorrow. We're doing a 5:00 show on Sean Diddy Combs. Man, that guy, it's relentless what's going on with him. And Faddis, I need to get you on that story as well. Really disturbing new information on that. So we're getting back to that. And by the way, Thursday is an interesting show as well at 12:30 because it's Halloween and I got to take my kids trick-or-treating. But Thursday, 12:30, we're looking at the Menendez brothers and asking, have they been rehabilitated? Can people be rehabilitated? We've got a former prison warden on, a former inmate, and a woman who's avoided prison her whole life. My mother, Carm, a licensed therapist. She's going to come on and give her take on all of that. So you got Carm, although Carm tells me I don't know if I'm going to do the show. I don't feel like doing the show. I'm like, you're the co-host of the show. She's like, I don't care. I'm busy. I'm like, you're retired. You're 85. So I'll keep arguing with her and we'll get it down. By the way, if you go to my Instagram page at Surviving the Survivor, Carm is speaking tonight along with myself to the Simon Wiesenthal Center in Toronto that does Holocaust education. It is a strictly virtual event, and the information is on Instagram at Surviving the Survivor. It's open to everybody. We would love to see you there. Until tomorrow at 5 on Diddy, we will see you on the flip side. Love you, America. Love you, Denver. Love you, Vegas. Love you, Florida. Love you, Bear County, Texas.